Hello, and welcome to Lila's Lullabies, where we spend time exploring with Lyla, a traveler who wanders the world at her own pace, while sharing her most enriching and restorative moments with you. In tonight's story, we'll follow Lyla as she experiences the beautiful California city, San Francisco. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to remember. Just settle in, get comfortable, and let yourself go. We're so glad you're here. Whenever you're ready, let's begin. Lyla stepped out of her hotel into the cool spring morning, and San Francisco greeted her with its particular brand of magic. Fog retreating across the bay, sunlight breaking through in golden shafts, the air crisp and fresh with the scent of eucalyptus and the sea. She had the whole day ahead of her, no schedule except the one she'd loosely sketched. Explore the city on foot, ride a cable car, see some of the famous sights and some of the hidden corners. Let San Francisco reveal itself at its own pace. She'd dressed in layers, knowing the city's weather could shift from cool to warm within blocks, depending on which neighborhood you were in and whether the fog had lifted. Comfortable walking shoes, jeans, a light sweater, and a jacket she could tie around her waist if needed. Her small crossbody bag held the essentials: water, sunscreen, her phone and wallet, a pair of sunglasses. The hotel was in the Marina District, and she decided to start by walking toward the Palace of Fine Arts, which was close enough to reach easily on foot. The neighborhood was beautiful in the morning light, residential streets lined with well-maintained homes, many of them with that distinctive San Francisco architecture: bay windows, decorative trim, painted in colors that ranged from subtle to bold. She walked along tree-lined sidewalks, past gardens just coming into spring bloom. Roses were budding, their leaves fresh and green. Hydrangeas were showing their first flowers, pale blues and pinks. Window boxes overflowed with pansies and trailing ivy. Everything felt alive, renewed, the city waking from winter into the gentleness of spring. The sound of the city was pleasant at this hour: birds singing from trees and rooftops, the distant hum of traffic, someone practicing piano in a house she passed, the notes floating out an open window. A dog barked once, then was quiet. A car started up and drove away, its engine fading. Lyla turned a corner and saw the Palace of Fine Arts ahead, its distinctive rotunda rising against the blue sky. As she approached, the full structure came into view: the classical colonnade reflected in the lagoon, the ornate details of the architecture, the weeping willows dipping their branches toward the water. It was breathtaking, this monument that seemed to belong to another time and place entirely. Built originally for the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition and meant to be temporary, it had been preserved and restored because the city couldn't bear to lose it. Lyla could understand why. There was something magical about it, this piece of Roman grandeur, transported to the edge of San Francisco Bay. She walked slowly around the lagoon, taking her time. Ducks paddled on the water, leaving V-shaped wakes. Swans glided near the colonnade, their white feathers brilliant in the morning sun. A few other people were there: a photographer setting up a tripod, a couple walking hand in hand, an elderly man feeding the birds from a paper bag. The rotunda's details revealed themselves as she got closer. The sculptures depicting figures in classical poses, the ornate capitals on the columns, the way the structure framed views of the water, and the greenery beyond. She stood for a while beneath the dome, looking up at the oculus, feeling small in the best way, reminded of architecture's power to inspire and elevate. After circling the lagoon, she continued walking, heading toward the marina itself. The path took her to the waterfront, where the bay spread out wide and sparkling, boats dotting its surface. The Golden Gate Bridge was visible in the distance, its towers rising through wisps of fog that hadn't quite dissipated, its cables catching the light. The marina green was busy with morning activity, people walking dogs, joggers following the path, kite flyers taking advantage of the breeze. The grass was vivid green, the kind that only comes with spring rains and mild temperatures. Lyla walked along the edge, enjoying the openness after the enclosed beauty of the palace. She stopped at a small cafe near the marina, its outdoor seating facing the water. A few tables were occupied, everyone seeming to move at a leisurely pace, savoring their coffee and the view. She ordered a latte and a croissant, then chose a table where she could watch the bay. The latte came in a wide ceramic cup, the foam decorated with a careful leaf pattern. The croissant was buttery and flaky, leaving crumbs on her fingers that she brushed away between bites. She ate slowly, enjoying the simple pleasure of breakfast with a view. No rush, nowhere she had to be. A sailboat tacked across the bay, its white sail full, moving gracefully through the water. Gulls circled overhead, occasionally diving for fish. The bridge stood in the background, that impossible span connecting the city to Marin County, beautiful and functional at once. When she finished, she paid and began walking east, following the waterfront toward Fort Mason and eventually Fisherman's Wharf. But before she got too far, she decided to turn inland, to climb up into the city's hills, to experience that particular San Francisco phenomenon, sudden elevation changes that revealed entirely new perspectives. She found a street that ascended steeply, and she began to climb. The incline was serious, her calves working, her breathing deepening. But the effort felt good, purposeful, and every few steps she turned to look back, watching the view expand. At the top of the hill, she paused to catch her breath. The vista was magnificent, the bay spread below, the Palace of Fine Arts visible from above, the marina green, the boats, the bridge, the hills of Marin across the water. The city revealed its geography in a way that was impossible to grasp from street level. She continued walking, following the ridge of the hill eastward. The neighborhood here was residential and lovely, homes with gardens that took advantage of the views, streets quiet and tree-lined. She passed a small park where a few children played on swings while their parents watched from benches. The streets of San Francisco were endlessly varied, she discovered. Some were perfectly flat, others impossibly steep. Some were wide and busy, others narrow and intimate. Each neighborhood had its own character. Victorian row houses painted in rainbow colors, Mediterranean-style villas with terracotta tiles, modern glass and steel constructions that caught and reflected the light. She was heading generally toward Pacific Heights, she knew, where the Lyon Street Steps were located. She'd read about them, a long stairway that climbed the hill, offering views and a good workout, popular with locals and visitors alike. When she found them, she understood immediately why people loved them. The stairs were beautifully designed, divided into sections, with landings between, gardens on either side full of flowers and greenery. She began to climb, taking her time, pausing at each landing to look back at the view. The stairs were steep, but not impossibly so, and the frequent landings made it manageable. Other people were climbing too, some clearly doing it for exercise, moving quickly and purposefully, others like her just exploring, moving at a gentler pace. At each landing, the view expanded. She could see more of the city, more of the bay, new landmarks appearing, the downtown towers, Alcatraz Island sitting in the middle of the water, the hills of the East Bay beyond. The perspective shifted with each section of stairs, each landing offering something slightly different. The gardens were beautiful, clearly tended with care. Lavender bloomed in purple clouds, its scent released each time the breeze stirred. Roses climbed trellises, their buds just beginning to open. Succulents created geometric patterns, their thick leaves storing water, perfectly adapted to the California climate. At the top of the stairs, Lyla stood at the edge of the Presidio, the former military base that was now a park. The view from here was among the best she'd seen. The entire northern waterfront visible, the bridge magnificent against the blue sky, the Pacific Ocean stretching away to the western horizon. She sat on a bench, drinking from her water bottle, feeling accomplished and happy. Her legs were tired from the climbing, but it was that good tiredness, the kind that came from using your body fully, from engaging with the physical world. A woman jogged past, then turned back. "First time doing the Lyon Steps?" she asked friendly. "Yes," Lyla said. "They're beautiful." "One of my favorite spots in the city," the woman said. "I try to do them a couple times a week. Never gets old, that view." "I can see why," Lyla agreed. The woman smiled and continued her run, and Lyla remained on the bench for a bit longer. She noticed the details around her, the way the light filtered through the trees, creating patterns on the ground, the sound of birds she couldn't identify, their songs complex and varied, the feel of the breeze, cool but pleasant, carrying the scent of pine and eucalyptus. When she felt ready, she stood and began walking through the Presidio, following paths that wound through the forest. The park was remarkable, a huge expanse of green right at the edge of the city, trails for hiking and biking, historic buildings from its military past, and everywhere, trees, eucalyptus and pine and cypress, creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight. She walked without particular direction, just following paths that looked interesting. She passed a small cemetery, its markers old and weathered, the graves of soldiers from various wars. She found viewpoints that looked out over the water, each one framing the Golden Gate Bridge differently. Eventually, she emerged near the bridge itself, closer than she'd been before. The scale of it was almost overwhelming, the towers rising impossibly high, the cables thick as tree trunks, the span stretching across the strait with elegant confidence. Traffic moved across it steadily, cars and buses and bicycles, the bridge carrying thousands of people every day, a vital artery of the city. She walked partway out onto the pedestrian path, feeling the bridge move slightly beneath her feet, that gentle sway that came from wind and traffic, from the structure's flexibility. The sound was distinctive. The hum of tires on the roadway, the whistle of wind through cables, the occasional deep horn of a ship passing below. The view from the bridge was extraordinary. Looking back toward the city, she could see the downtown towers, the hills stacked behind them, the neighborhoods spreading in every direction. Looking west, the Pacific Ocean stretched away, vast and blue. Looking down, the water moved swiftly through the strait, currents and eddies visible on the surface. After taking it all in, she walked back to land and found a spot to sit near Fort Point, the old brick fortress that sat at the base of the bridge. She was hungry now, midday approaching, and she'd planned to find lunch somewhere in the city. She made her way back toward more populated areas, following signs toward Chestnut Street, one of the main commercial streets in the Marina District. The walk took her through residential neighborhoods, more beautiful homes and gardens, more steep streets and surprising vistas. Chestnut Street was busy with lunch crowds, restaurants and cafes, with outdoor seating, shops displaying spring fashions and home goods. She found a small Italian place that looked promising, its menu featuring fresh pasta and salads, simple preparations that let ingredients shine. Inside, it was cozy and informal, with a few tables and a counter where you could watch the kitchen work. She ordered pappardelle with spring vegetables, asparagus, peas, young garlic, and a glass of white wine. The food came quickly, and it was exactly what she wanted. The pasta perfectly cooked, the vegetables fresh and sweet, the sauce light and lemony. She ate at a leisurely pace, watching people pass on the street outside, the endless variety of San Francisco's residents and visitors. Young professionals in casual office wear, parents with strollers, elderly couples walking slowly, tourists in athletic gear ready for more sightseeing. After lunch, she decided it was time to experience one of San Francisco's most iconic features, the cable cars. She walked toward the nearest cable car line, which would take her up and over the hills toward downtown and Lombard Street, the famous crooked street she wanted to see. The cable car stop had a line, but it moved quickly. When her car arrived, she climbed aboard, finding a spot on the running board, holding onto the pole. The gripman rang the bell, that distinctive San Francisco sound, and they lurched into motion. Riding the cable car was pure joy. The wind in her face, the city passing by, the sound of the cable running beneath the street, the gripman's skill in controlling the car, gripping and releasing the cable at just the right moments. They climbed a hill so steep it seemed impossible, the car pulling steadily, never faltering. At the crest, the view opened up again and several passengers gasped. The city fell away below them, buildings and streets in layers descending toward the water. Then down they went, the gripman using the brakes to control their descent, the car swaying slightly around curves. Other passengers were smiling too, everyone caught up in the simple pleasure of this old-fashioned transport that was completely practical and completely magical at once. A child stood at the front with his father, watching everything with wide eyes. An elderly woman sat inside the car, clearly a local, riding it as she might a bus, but still with a small smile of appreciation. Lyla rode the cable car through several neighborhoods, getting off finally near Lombard Street. She walked the few blocks to the famous section, the one-block stretch that zigzagged down the steep hill in 8 hairpin turns. From the top, she could see the whole thing, the red brick street descending in tight switchbacks, gardens planted between each turn full of hydrangeas just coming into bloom, the view of the bay at the bottom. Cars were slowly navigating the turns, following the one-way route, while tourists photographed from the sidewalks. Lyla walked down the pedestrian steps that paralleled the street, taking her time, stopping to admire the gardens. Someone had clearly put enormous care into them. The flowers arranged for color and texture, the plants healthy and full, everything maintained with obvious love. At the bottom, she turned to look back up. From this angle, Lombard Street was even more dramatic. The turns stacked above each other, the houses lining it perched on the steep slope. It was charming and slightly absurd, this most crooked street, a solution to an engineering problem that had become a beloved landmark. She continued walking, exploring the surrounding neighborhood, which was quieter, more residential. She found herself on streets she hadn't planned to visit, small parks she hadn't known existed, corners that offered unexpected views. One park in particular caught her attention, a small space tucked between buildings, with a few benches and a garden that looked carefully tended by neighbors. An older man sat on one bench, reading a paperback. A woman was deadheading roses, removing spent blooms to encourage new growth. "Beautiful garden," Lyla said as she passed. The woman looked up and smiled. "Thank you. It's a community effort. Everyone on the block contributes." "It shows," Lyla said. She sat on another bench for a while, enjoying this quiet corner. This was the San Francisco that tourists often missed, she thought. These neighborhood spaces, these small gardens and parks, these places that belonged to the people who lived here, that weren't on maps or in guidebooks, but were the real heart of the city. A cat appeared from under a hedge, striped and confident, clearly well-fed and cared for. It wove between Lila's legs once, then settled in a patch of sun to groom itself. The simple domesticity of the moment was lovely. The cat, the garden, the peaceful afternoon, the woman tending her roses with patient attention. Eventually, Lyla stood and continued her wandering. The afternoon was progressing, the light beginning to take on that golden quality that comes before evening. She made her way slowly back toward the cable car line, planning to ride it back toward the waterfront to end her day somewhere near where she'd started. She caught a different cable car this time, heading in a different direction, seeing new neighborhoods and streets. The city never repeated itself, she noticed. Each block was distinct. Each street had its own character. The hills meant that views constantly changed, that you could never see very far ahead, that each turn might reveal something completely unexpected. The cable car brought her to the area near Ghirardelli Square, the old chocolate factory converted into shops and restaurants. She walked through it, admiring the historic brick buildings, the careful preservation that honored the industrial past while creating something new and useful. She found herself at Aquatic Park, a small curved beach protected by a pier. People were swimming despite the cold water, hardy souls in wetsuits, or just accepting the temperature shock. Others walked the pier or sat on benches watching the bay. Lyla walked out onto the pier, joining the evening strollers. The Golden Gate Bridge was visible from here, glowing in the late afternoon light. Alcatraz sat in the middle of the bay, its buildings stark and fascinating. Sailboats moved across the water, heading back to harbor as the day wound down. At the end of the pier, she stood looking back at the city. The hills rose behind the waterfront, buildings climbing their slopes, the geography that made San Francisco so distinctive fully visible. She could trace the route she'd walked, the Palace of Fine Arts over there, the Marina Green, the hills she'd climbed, the Presidio Forest, all of it connected by her footsteps, by the hours of exploration. She felt deeply content, filled with that particular happiness that comes from a day well spent, from engaging fully with a place, from walking until your feet are tired and your mind is full of images and impressions. The sun was lowering now, approaching the hills to the west. The light was becoming richer, warmer, painting everything in gold. She walked back along the pier and found a cafe with outdoor seating facing the water. She ordered a cup of tea, something herbal and soothing, and sat watching the day complete itself. The tea was hot and fragrant, chamomile and something citrusy, warming her from the inside as the air grew cooler. Other people were doing the same thing, pausing at day's end, watching the light change, marking the transition from afternoon to evening. There was something ritual about it, this collective acknowledgement of the day's passing, this moment of appreciation before moving into whatever came next. The sky began to shift through its palette, gold to orange to pink to purple. The water reflected these colors, becoming a canvas, the boat's dark silhouettes against the luminous surface. The bridge turned from gold to rust to a deep burgundy as the sun sank lower. Lyla finished her tea and stood, knowing she should start making her way back to her hotel. The walk wasn't long, and she could follow the waterfront most of the way, ending where she'd begun. The day a completed circle. She walked slowly along the marina, the promenade quiet now, the crowds of midday gone. A few runners passed, getting in an evening workout. Dog walkers moved at their pets' pace, stopping whenever interesting smells required investigation. The boats in the marina bobbed gently, their halyards making soft clinking sounds against masts. The Palace of Fine Arts appeared again, and she stopped to see it in this different light. The lagoon was still, reflecting the rotunda and columns perfectly, doubling their beauty. The structure glowed in the evening light, seeming almost translucent, ethereal, as if it might dissolve with the coming darkness. She stood at the edge of the lagoon for a long moment, completing her circle, returning to where her day had begun, but seeing it all differently now, with the perspective of the hours in between, with the fullness of everything she'd experienced. A few other people were there, also drawn by the beauty of the evening light on the architecture. No one spoke. There was a shared understanding that some moments were better appreciated in silence. As darkness approached, lights began to come on. Street lights along the paths, lights in the surrounding homes, the first stars appearing in the deepening blue above. The city was transitioning again, becoming its nighttime self, and Lyla felt grateful to witness it, to be present for this daily transformation. She walked the final blocks to her hotel, the streets familiar now after the morning's walk, but seen differently in the evening light. The same gardens she'd noticed in the morning were there, but shadowed now, mysterious, suggesting rather than revealing. In her hotel room, she kicked off her shoes and sat on the bed, feeling the pleasant ache in her legs and feet, the tiredness that came from miles of walking, from climbing hills and stairs, from engaging so fully with the physical city. She thought about the day, about all the moments that had composed it, the classical beauty of the Palace of Fine Arts, the view from the Lyon Street Steps, the thrill of the cable car, the absurd charm of Lombard Street, the quiet neighborhood park, the sunset from Aquatic Park. Each moment had been full, rich with sensation and discovery. San Francisco had revealed itself to her in layers, the famous landmarks that deserved their fame, yes, but also the quieter corners, the neighborhood gardens, the small parks, the unexpected views that appeared around every corner. The city's gift was this combination of the spectacular and the intimate, the grand and the humble, all of it interwoven by those impossible hills that gave every street its own character, every view its own drama. She stood and went to the window, looking out at the neighborhood. Lights glowed in windows across the street, people visible moving through their evening routines. The domestic normalcy was comforting, a reminder that even in a city famous for its beauty and tourist attractions, regular life continued. People made dinner and helped children with homework and walked dogs and talked about their days. Lyla felt part of something larger, connected to this city through her day of exploration, through her footsteps on its streets and stairs, through her presence at its viewpoints and parks and landmarks. She had touched San Francisco, and it had touched her back, leaving her with memories and impressions that would last, that would color her sense of cities and beauty, and the joy of exploration. The evening stretched ahead, peaceful and unhurried. She could order room service or find a nearby restaurant, could read or simply rest, could reflect on the day or let it settle naturally into memory. Whatever she chose would be right, would be enough, because the day itself had been so full, so satisfying, so complete. Outside, the city continued its evening, lights spreading across the hills, the bay dark now but dotted with the lights of boats and the far shore. Somewhere, cable cars were still running, their bells ringing. Somewhere, people were climbing stairs for exercise or views or both. Somewhere, the fog was beginning to creep back in from the ocean, preparing to blanket the city in its nightly embrace. Lyla stood at the window a bit longer, holding the day gently, grateful for San Francisco's generosity, for the way it had opened itself to her wandering, for the beauty it had shared so freely. The city of hills and light, of cable cars and crooked streets, of views that took your breath away, and quiet corners that restored your soul. She felt peaceful, content, happy in the fullest sense, the deep satisfaction of having been present, having paid attention, having received what the day offered with an open heart and curious mind.